Okay, very good. Good evening. My name is Denise Fleming, president of the Hill Farm Historical Society. On behalf of the entire board, we are so glad you are here with us tonight. And I would like to also do a special welcome to residents from Waverly Gardens who are here this evening with us. Yay. The annual Hill Farm Historical Society Spring Dinner is more than an opportunity for us to gather and reflect on the unique history of North Oaks and what makes the Hill Farm so special. We are here because of the forethought and generosity of those who came before us, who believed preserving the Hill Farm and the remaining Hill Farm buildings was so important, and also in telling the story of the history of this amazing place. We are here to preserve that history for the future generations. So I'm so grateful for those visionary community members who came before us. I think we should give them a round of applause. Since the Hill Farm Historical Society's inception in 1989, the Spring Dinner has also served as the annual meeting we are required to hold, according to our bylaws, for the purpose of electing new board members. So we'll be doing that in just a bit. It won't take us very long, so just bear with us. But I first wanted to start out by thanking our Spring Dinner Planning Committee. Committee members, as I call your name, will you please stand to be recognized? So Julie Oliver. Buzzing around. Martha Rice. Gretchen Needham. Gretchen. Nancy Hans. Laurel Krebsbach. Andrea Swenson. And Paul Dixon. Yay. Thank you for all the work and attention to detail that went into planning this evening. So again, we wouldn't be here without them. So, hey everyone, okay, those of you who just stood up, stand up again, all right? Because the next part is I'd also like current Hill Farm board members to stand. So if you're on the board currently, please stand. All right? So these are the people who help us fulfill the Hill Farm Historical Society's mission of sharing the history of the James J. Hill North Oaks Farm through its preservation. So again, thank you so much, board members. We couldn't do it without you. So next, I'd like to thank retiring board members, Mary Nussbaum and Patricia Orrud, neither of whom could be with us tonight. But I'd also like to acknowledge that we have some current board members who are renewing their board terms. So I'm going to say your name and please stand, and then we'll applaud at the end. How's that? So please stand. Paul Dixon, Walter Krebsbach, Sara Vanier, Gretchen Needham, and Andrea Swenson. Okay, now stay standing, because then we also tonight, this is the important part, we have to vote. So the board has nominated the following 3 individuals to join the Hill Farm Board of Directors: Ricky Banerjee, Gretchen Hall, and Craig Johnson. And Craig is the only one who's here this evening with us, so Craig, could you please stand? There we are. Okay, stay standing, Craig. All right, now we have to vote. So I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor of endorsing these new and renewing Hill Farm Historical Society board members, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? Okay, I think the ayes have it. Thank you. Welcome. Appreciate it. Finally, I'd like to give a special acknowledgement to board member Ford Erickson. Ford, would you please stand? Yes. All right. So Ford has chaired our building restoration campaign since 2024. We are in the final push to raise enough money to replace the cedar roofs on the iconic red barn and the blacksmith shop and machine shop. And we're hoping to do so by later this summer. So Ford, thank you so much for your efforts in this regard. Appreciate it. So before we hear from Andrea and Sara, Sara would like to share a short excerpt from the North Oaks Company's documentary that was created last fall for the recognition of the 75th anniversary of North Oaks. Thank you.
As the Hill family's legacy in North Oaks was passed down from one generation to the next, its ownership was now in question, as Louie's adult children would decide the fate of the North Oaks Company.
It was time for my brother, sister, and myself to decide what to do with certain assets.
My original thought when Mr. Hill died was the family would sell the property.
We were sort of, I wouldn't say retired, but we'd started our deer farm in Canada, and life was very relaxed. And so she went down to Minnesota to sell her shares to her brother.
And everybody's sitting around the table, and so the North Oaks Company comes up.
The assumption was that her brother was the heir apparent, and everyone for years was working under that assumption.
And my brother said no, he didn't want to have anything to do with it, and my sister said the same. And I was shocked.
So she came back on Sunday night, and I was sort of curious. I just said, so how much did you get? And she said, well, it didn't work out that way. And I said, what do you mean?
I bought the company.
So I was like sort of a state of shock. I said, for how much?
I said, I don't know, Doug. You'll have to go back and figure that out. He's the numbers guy.
So suddenly my tranquil life of being a quiet deer farmer in Canada had come to an abrupt stop.
I realized her passion was that she didn't want her father's vision to go away.
And I think she was very proud of what her father did.
One of my first thoughts was, what did we buy? It took a long time to sort out the details of what the North Oaks Company was.
Of the 5,500 acres of property, 2/3 had been turned into residential areas or green spaces, leaving a little more than 1,600 acres undeveloped.
There was sort of a master plan to basically cookie cutter the whole property.
I don't think anybody in the community realized how close they were to being a mass-developed parcel.
And it would look like every other suburb around the Twin Cities.
Mari just didn't want to do that. She thought there's a different way to develop, and I just assured her that I'd help her achieve her vision.
Doug is very good at business side of things. Mari is an artist. She brings a vision.
Step one was to figure out how we design the development. Our company president had introduced us to the conservation designer.
Randall Arndt was giving a workshop.
It was kind of a new way to break up land and sell property and save trees.
Is this the sort of thing you're talking about? And Mari says, yes, this is absolutely what we're talking about.
She invited me and Jim Kurth to come along to just sit in on this seminar.
It took us about half an hour before we realized that this was the man for us.
I began working with Mari and Doug almost 30 years ago. Mari's father was very progressive for its time, but Mari and Doug felt, could we take it to the next level?
We knew we wanted to have a green space and a conservation area. That was very, very important.
Mari and Doug's approach was twice green. Twice green means green environmentally and green economically.
You know, we still had to pay off the banks. We borrowed money, and Randall had plenty of evidence where this has been done. It could show us and say, go and visit this site.
I went to one of them in New Jersey called Radburn, and it was a planned urban development. And I talked to the people walking around in the green space, and people were there whose parents had been there, whose grandparents had been there, and I knew it's what we needed to do here.
At the heart of this new direction was the idea of density with purpose. Homes would be built on smaller lots, clustered around village greens and neighborhood parks.
You actually do kind of high density where people are living, and then you conserve open space.
First thing I want to do is walk the land. Walk the land with someone that's been there in all 4 seasons. We had this enormous map, and the first step was to identify what lands did we want to keep as permanent open space. Then you locate the houses around that open space so they get views. And those views add the value to the lot.
And you have to understand, I was not a developer before this, so I didn't come with any agenda. I was all ears, trying to pay attention.
He helped us develop the big picture. That took about 3 years.
Once Randall had come up with concept plans, they decided to have an open house to basically invite the community.
So that everybody knows it's what's best for the city.
Wetland restoration projects were introduced, development sites, future road locations.
Boy, he could make 200 people clap hands real fast.
In 1998, a new master plan was presented at public meetings held by the City Council, the Planning Commission, and the Homeowners Association. After more than a year of discussion and revisions, the plan, which would guide development for the next 30 years, was approved. The most notable aspect was how more than 50% of the land purchased by Doug and Mari would be used.
Back in 1999, the Harpers gave a huge gift here to North Oaks. They forever granted an easement of the conservation area into the Minnesota Land Trust. It's 20% of North Oaks, nearly.
Everyone says, what are you doing that for? You know, you realize how much that's worth?
If there was ever an environmentalist that I knew, it was Mari.
The conservation easement here in North Oaks is really one of the jewels that the Land Trust has. In the Twin Cities metropolitan area, this is by far the largest. It really encompasses a wide range of habitat types for a variety of wildlife and plant species that are important to this area.
Well, the geese have moved in. We have trumpeter swans.
To see animals in your yard, turkeys, deer, that was a big attraction for us.
There have been bears in here. There's enough open land here that they can get away with it.
This spring, my wife was out walking along Pleasant Lake and she noted 34 bald eagles.
I can hear our red-winged blackbirds here calling in the background. They need these larger tracts of land.
A forest is a very complex organism, and to have preserved a forest in perpetuity is the greatest legacy you can leave.
Well, first of all, it is so wonderful to look around the room and realize that we have a sold-out spring dinner this year. Thank you so much for coming out and supporting the Hill Farm Historical Society. It feels so good to be in a room with all of you who care about the history of North Oaks. Well, it is my honor to sit down tonight with a Hill heir, and we wanted to play that clip in particular from the new North Oaks documentary because you just met Sara's parents, Mari and Doug. And Sara Vanier is here tonight to talk about her involvement in the Hill Farm Historical Society as a board member and also your connection to this historic family. So Sara, I'll let you begin, just with a little bit of your story. I just said a little bit of how you fit into the Hill family tree,
Sure.
But for those that don't know the whole lineage, if you want to tell us a little bit about your background.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to the Hill Farm Historical Society for inviting me to talk tonight. That's great. I'm happy to see so many people here. I live in Montreal, and I'm, as Andrea mentioned, Doug and Mari's daughter. And Louis was my grandfather, Louis Hill Sr., my great-grandfather, and James J. Hill, my great-great-grandfather.
So where did you grow up? Where have you lived
I
most of
grew
your
up
life?
on a farm in eastern Ontario. Probably not, well, slightly similar to James J. Hill, who was also from Ontario. And then ended up in university in Montreal and have ended up living in Montreal.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I would just love to hear your memories of learning that you're part of such a historic family. Like, at what point did you learn that? What was that experience like for you?
I think it was mostly, well, we have some pictures that are rolling, and it was really at the fishing camp. Although I had, some visits here as a young child. But I would go regularly to the fishing camp, which is located in Quebec, about 17-hour drive east of Montreal, to give you an idea of how far away it was. And it's a fishing camp that was established by James J. Hill in 1883. He had originally leased the land. It was fashionable for industrialists of the time to go fishing. and invite their guests. And so eventually he ended up buying a portion of a river from the Labrador Company. And he would invite his guests to come up, and he had a steam yacht called the Wakuta that they would go by rail to Quebec or Montreal and then get on this yacht to go up to the fishing camp. And so flash forward 100 years later, I was going with my grandparents, and at the fishing camp there were all these photographs that were pinned to the wall of James J. Hill, my grandfather as a child, LW, women fishing, which was always very important, the tradition of women also going fishing. And it was really like astonishing to be in a pretty like amazing log cabin that was actually built by the same architect as the Great Northern chalets, I guess, or train stations. So that is how I came to know a little bit about the Minnesota history.
So how old were you at that point?
12 when I
wow.
first went fishing. And I've been going pretty much every year since, with the exception of 1 year and COVID, which we can just discount.
Don't have to get into that. What kind of fish are there?
Atlantic salmon. Yeah. So yes, there's a diminishing return recently, but we did do a lot of studies in the early 2000s with the Atlantic Salmon Federation there to put, not receivers, but acoustic tags on fish to send them out, and then they would send back a relay as to where they were. So actually we had one that went all the way to like where the Greenland feeding grounds are, that a ship had picked up. So it was it's really interesting to see kind of modern technology at work on a river like that to find, troubleshoot why there's less population.
So when you were a young person, did you already have kind of an interest in this, learning more about nature and conservation and research?
Absolutely, definitely. It was certainly, I don't know if it bred into me, I suppose, in some ways, but it was evident in everything that was done either here or in on our farm in Canada or at the fishing river or even now going forward. So it's very important. Yeah.
So what are some of your first memories of coming to North Oaks?
Well, I think it's fun to recollect about that. And I was thinking about a couple of things. Well, we would always come this time of year because my grandfather and great-grandfather's birthday was on May 19th, which is next week. So I always remember the springtime, but we would come in the wintertime and go cross-country skiing and horseback riding in the summer, where my mother reminded me that I had fallen off the horse, of course, and got right back up, so that's good. But I do remember my grandfather, he used to tell stories, the hand talk, which he must have learned in Glacier Park, where it's Plains Indian Sign Language. And so he would tell stories, and it looks like sign language, but you use your hands to tell the story. So that was a very nice recollection. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you want people to know about your grandfather, Louis W. Hill Jr.?
Well, a lot of people here had met him, right, and knew him. He was a great guy, super guy, and he loved reading, and he loved talking also about things that he had read. Maybe as a child, I felt like he had talked a little bit too much, but he was very genuine and interested in speaking to everybody and learning things, very curious. He loved being outside and golfing, swimming, as was displayed in the video, that we didn't see that part. He loved swimming. He loved skiing. He really loved North Oaks. That was evident from just spending time here and being excited and talking about it. Yeah, he was a wonderful man.
That really comes through in the documentary, which we should mention. You can watch this documentary. It's free. It's streaming online on the North Oaks Company website, which is where you saw us pull it up to play for you. But yeah, it does talk about his love for North Oaks and passion for developing it into a residential community and really having this vision for it. Which
Making it a better place.
Yeah. And to do something different.
Yes.
Which is really a brave thing to do.
Definitely very unusual for that period of time. and even going forward with, as the video clip showed, the way they re-engineered the development to have so much conservation land is also new and exciting, or for the times it was.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are fellow board members for the Hill Farm Historical Society, and you've been involved for quite a long time. What inspired you to join the board of the Historical Society?
Well, I think I've always cared certainly about farming because I grew up on a farm, and I also studied art history and some architectural history, and so I'm fascinated by keeping or preserving, agricultural history alive, because there's a real connection that people have lost moving into the cities and not realizing where food comes from. That's a big problem these days. So it's great to be able to preserve such an old farm that was also innovative. Like the dairy, it had all, when it was built at the time, it had all the modern equipment. So it may not look like that now, but it was quite impressive. And it's important for the region to know that this experimental farm existed here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for being involved.
Thanks.
I'm curious to know, so when we were talking ahead of this event, you told me that you wrote a master's thesis, and it was inspired by the train lines that James J. Hill developed, and not in a way that you might expect, but tell us more about your research.
Yeah, what I did was I was looking at the way they designed train cars on the interiors to make it more comfortable for the first-class passengers, predominantly, to travel out west. And so I had looked specifically at the Oriental Limited, which went along the Great Northern Railway line. And the Oriental Limited began in St. Paul and ended in Seattle. And in 1905, it started. And it had all the modern conveniences. It was beautiful on the interior. It had stained glass. And it was, we don't really think of it, but at that time, a lot of people weren't traveling fast, like they were physically traveling quickly. So that was actually something that was in consideration when they were building the train cars, to make people feel more comfortable and more like at home, because it was wild, and crazy in the West, or the perception was at least. So it was fun to look at that. And I got to live in Minnesota while I did the research at the Minnesota Historical Society, which was great. And it was a wonderful topic to study. And it was very interesting because, the train, the Oriental Limited, it was named because James J. Hill had a steamship line that was going to Asia at the time. And so his ultimate goal was this kind of like internationalism of bringing, the States to Asia and then back, of transport. Whether it worked or not really in the end, but it was a fantastic idea. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around how many ideas this one person had.
Absolutely. Well, that's actually something that was, I learned just by doing, studying this, was it is amazing the kind of experimentation or willingness to just say, well, let's just try this. Like here on the farm, how he had bred dairy with meat cattle, so to see if you could get a more productive animal, and it didn't really catch on, but it was great that he had this ability to just throw everything at it.
Yeah, you don't know till you try.
Exactly. And it's nice, he did, of course, have the means to be able to try all these wonderful things.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you're doing this research and, coming here to Minnesota and, really connecting with this history, were there times where you would have to remind yourself, oh, this is my family? Or did you feel that connection always?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I feel a connection to Minnesota because I look like a lot of Minnesotans, right? So I always felt like I belong here in some ways, and I've always loved it here. It was astonishing, the more I learned about it as I got older and more involved with the North Oaks Company or the Hill Farm Historical Society, or the foundations that I was a part of. One, the Jerome Foundation, which is a foundation located in St. Paul, Minneapolis, on the border, but it supports artists here in the Twin Cities and in New York, as well as the Camargo Foundation, which was another foundation started by Jerome, but it's in the south of France. and it's a foundation that hosts residents for different topics, arts or thinkers, scholars.
What a family.
Yeah, so it's remarkable.
Well, I'd love to touch more on the conservation element, which I know is a huge passion of yours and your mother, and we saw in the video some of the work that's been done here in North Oaks. But in your research into the history and those early days on the farm, what did you learn about how that was kind of prioritized from an early stage?
Well, I think it goes back to that idea where James J. Hill really just, he wanted to do this experimentation and had this farm and was able to, try different things, but also conserve the land and enjoy the land around it, albeit it was for his own family. But I think, the goal, and even his son's goal of kind of creating, helping to create a national park to, make it into a park was also part of a conservation effort for his time. It's quite amazing that even now here in North Oaks, a lot of the things that were established at that time have continued on with James J. Hill's vision of maybe his vision, Louis' vision especially, and my grandfather's vision.
Absolutely. One area of fascination that we share is this Osborne map that we have displayed actually over in the corner here.
Yes.
Thank you to Julie Oliver for bringing that in and sharing it. But tell me more about your interest in this map and what you love about it.
Well, it's fun because I really started to look at it and then do a deep dive into the research about Osborne. And I, to be frank, I didn't know too much about him except that he was a cartoonist. And then I read the book, and then I realized, wow, there's an association with Jerome Hill and Maud. He and Jerome, so Louis' brother, my grandfather's brother, had both gone to Yale, and they ended up at the Académie Scandinave in Paris at the same time. And then met some other friends, and then Osborne ended up going to his property in Cassis in the south of France near Marseille. And while he was there, he met Jerome's sister Maud, which he must have fallen in love with because she was lovely. And there's stories in his biography or autobiography about them traveling around together and showing his love for him. And then the map, of course, was given to my mom by her cousin, and he was so happy because of all the little hearts on the map, which show, as he said, Lowry said, all the places they had kissed in North Oaks, Maud and Osborne. In the end, they didn't actually end up staying together. He married somebody else. But the map is fascinating, and I think it's quite cool. First, because it has all the visual representations of animals, trees, all the natural features, everything that was built out by the hills also, like ski hills or the dairy or the barns, that kind of thing. It's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What an expression of love. A hand-drawn map of your home with all the little hearts.
Well, he had said in his book that he had some difficulties because his art is quite odd, like his cartooning. It's very wild, and he had written in the book that it was actually just showing his feelings. He wasn't trying to make a visual representation, it was to show his feelings. And that really shows through.
It does.
Yeah.
And James J. Hill is presiding over it in the corner like a wizard.
I guess so. I'm not sure about that. I was looking at that, thinking, well, it does look like the Izbushka, the chalet, right? And then I thought, is that James J. Hill, or who is that in the corner?
I'm curious, as a somewhat newcomer to North Oaks, other people might be more familiar, but the homes that the Hill family has lived in North Oaks, many of them are still here. You mentioned Izbushka, the chalet that was built in 1929. What are some of the other homes that you've gotten to visit and see?
Well, James J. Hill's house was torn down, or the one that was on Pleasant Lake. And then the only one that I think remains is the one that my grandfather had built in 1949.
Okay.
And that's on Spring Farm, and it is off of Centerville Road. And it's a beautiful house that they loved living in, and it's beautiful to visit. It has a spring or a well outside, so when I was a kid, I would always try to pump the water out of the well. Yeah.
So we learned a little bit about the conservation area in that video clip, but I'm wondering if there's anything you can share or add of why that was such an important initiative for your family and for the North Oaks Company, and anything else you want us to know about it.
Well, certainly the conservation area is something that even in their lives in general, they're into preserving the land and improving it. And also it's a great, here at least, it's a fantastic resource in order for people to use it for activities, for the trail system, as well as all of the animals that have come back, like the sandhill cranes and all the other animals that you saw in the video. Well, you live here, so you know about them.
I love waking up to that bizarre sound of the sandhill crane.
Yeah, exactly. Even today, you know, all the wild turkeys that have come back is amazing.
Yes.
The Canada geese, which is also fantastic, although some people are so-so on the mess they make, but it is wonderful that they were brought back. Yeah.
We've dipped our toe into some North Oaks controversy.
Well, I won't go any further.
But it is something that maybe we take for granted if we don't know the history of this, that because there is that protected land, these animals are flourishing
absolutely
in this area.
Yeah.
I just heard loons the last few weeks, which feels really magical.
Yeah, and it brings people, alive and into nature, and nature is very important. Your blood pressure drops, you can relax walking around the trails, and it's a very different feeling from other communities to have a conservation area like that. Yeah.
Do you still have time to walk the trails when you're visiting?
Yes, usually if I go to the office, I walk to the office through the trails.
Oh,
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, there's been some news lately about North Oaks being built out.
Yes.
There was a huge article in the Star Tribune you may have seen recently that the North Oaks Company has reached the end of its development in North Oaks. And I'm curious, thinking about the work that has been done by your family over a number of generations now, what do you want current residents to know about how we can keep this going, how we can carry this history forward?
Well, I think most importantly, it's the kind of curiosity of the natural environment and keeping, fortunately the conservation area is in a trust, so it will perpetuate, which is great. But it is important for the residents to recognize it and use it, to enjoy it, and to see everything that it has to offer and bring kids into it and show them the natural environment and animals and have them participate in just walking around the trails and enjoying it.
Yeah. I know one of the things we discussed too was the love of scientific research throughout the generations of the family. How would you like to see that, carry on here?
I think it would be great if there could be other projects that the community establishes to do different things, like could be improving water quality, or creating methods to get rid of invasive species. Like, for instance, there's a new project that is happening in North Oaks where it's a multi-place study, of which there's, I think, 5 1-acre plots where they're studying different ways to manage buckthorn removal, and it's a multi-year study, and eventually they'll figure out which one works best. So things like that are important, and you can only do it in a place where it's a conservation area, where it's untouched.
Right. That's great. Well, what else would you like us to know about what your family has going on? It seems like you are involved across the globe. You were telling me you have places in New Zealand and you're busy in Montreal. What's going on with your family?
We have a big conservation project in Quebec. My parents are one of 4 partners where they bought it's an old seigneurie, which is the original kind of designation that the King of France would give to a block of land in Quebec. And so it's 65,000 acres. And it was being used it is used for hunting and fishing, and you can rent chalets. There's, 20 chalets on this whole massive property. But they've given, the partners have given beginning about 12 years ago, 10,000 acres to the Nature Conservancy, and they've protected the entire lake in its own watershed. The property is so large. So they've protected the lake entirely, and they plan to continue on, protect all the water catchment areas as well as other things. They've given a bunch of black maple, like a forest of black maple, to the Quebec government to protect because it's very rare to find. And currently they have the chalets, which they rent out, very few, but we have an institute for research, and where we have researchers from universities and interns from high school onward, school groups that come, as well as all sorts of projects where they're studying water. It could be fish, insects, trees, anything really, mammals. And so they found a whole bunch of rare species that hadn't been known before of plants, as well as like a mollusk, which they had never known existed, and some insects also. So it's an ongoing project, and this, in a couple of years, they will have completed building the actual institute building, which oversees all of the land and makes sure that it's protected.
Incredible. And you mentioned you yourself sit on the board of a few different organizations.
Yep.
You're still on the board of the Jerome Foundation?
Not on the Jerome Foundation. My tenure ended. I'm on the board of the Canuck Institute, and also for the Camargo Foundation. I'm a trustee of that. And so that is close to my heart, since I really, I love Jerome's artwork and his experimentation in art. So, and filmmaking and music. He composed music also. And it's quite incredible to see his legacy continue on through the Jerome Foundation as well as through the Camargo Foundation.
I mean, that is incredible. You know, I know people in the music community here who had their careers changed because they got a Jerome grant. And to think that it all traces back here is really wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Sara, thank you so much for this. It is one thing to read history in a book, but it's another to hear it from the mouth of someone who's connected to this family and to this legacy. So I feel very lucky that you got to be here with us tonight and that we got to hear your stories. I'm going to close with a brief sales pitch. Are you ready? Okay. So you have heard that we are in the middle of a capital campaign. There are 3 remaining buildings on the historic James J. Hill Farm site, and the roofs were last repaired in 1989 when the Hill Farm Historical Society was formed and took over the preservation of this site. One of those roofs has already been replaced, thank you to the support of people in this very community. And we have a goal now to reach another $100,000 to replace the remaining 2. And that is where we need your support. So you're going to see some envelopes on your table before you leave tonight. If you have it in your heart to help us out, any amount would be wonderful. And we really appreciate your support in protecting this real crown jewel of North Oaks and of Hill family history. So there it is. You survived my sales pitch.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you all for being here tonight. What a wonderful evening. And thank you again to Sara Lydiatt-Vanier.